All right, we're also introducing the idea of what is the integration of trig. So we've taken a derivative of our trig function. So if you remember, the derivative of sine is going to give you cosine. The derivative of positive sine gave me negative, or positive cosine gives me negative sine. But since I have the positive going with the sine with my integration, I'm going to have a negative there. So for integration, remember I told you all cos are negative? Well, in this case, all solutions that have the co in them, if you notice, they are all negative. So that kind of sticks with it. So all your cos for your answers, once again, are negative. And again, like here's a little silly thing for sine and cosine to help you remember that. Again, I showed you Santa Claus and negative clause. If you took the derivative of sine, it's cosine. If you took the derivative of cosine, it's negative sine. The derivative of negative sine is negative cosine. Well, the same is going to be true when you take the antiderivative. Except the antiderivative are going to go up. The antiderivative of negative sine is positive cosine. Antiderivative of cosine is sine. The antiderivative of positive sine is, there's that negative co again. Negative cosine. Just a little cutesy trick just to help you out. All right, number 1, the antiderivative of 2 sine x dx. So if you again remember that whole Santa Claus thing, the antiderivative of sine, his partner is cosine. But I told you all the time when you deal with cosine, if I have a co as an answer, it's going to be negative, and my coefficient is 2. So that gives me negative 2 cosine plus c. Number 2, find the antiderivative of pi times secant squared theta minus cosecant squared theta d theta. And so the thing about what, if I gave you the derivative of secant squared, what was the original function? The derivative of what is secant squared? And I hope you remember that'll be tangent. So my coefficient is pi. This will be pi times tangent of theta. Theta again is your independent variable. And then you want to think about, here's your cos again. So I have a negative here, so that's a negative. A negative is going to give me a positive, but I'll go ahead and copy it down. So there's that minus sign. So this is this minus sign. And I told you that all cos are negative, so I'm going to write another negative right there. And so what gives me a derivative of negative cosecant squared? Well, that will give me positive cotangent. And you'll see as I cancel my negatives, you'll see that positive cotangent. So the derivative of cotangent is negative secant squared, which I have underlined in red. And then finally, plus c. Number 3. They want us to find the antiderivative of 3t squared minus secant tan t, secant t tangent t, and then plus sine of pi over 2 dt. Please be careful. I did this on purpose because I've noticed a lot of you guys like to integrate a number. So let's kind of do over here. So we're going to use a little bit of pre-cal. So what is sine of pi over 2? That's 90 degrees. Sine of pi over 2, 90 degrees, is equal to, hope you can remember, is equal to 1. So I'm going to rewrite my integral with that simplified form. So I have the integral of 3t squared minus secant t tangent t. And I'm just going to go ahead and just write plus 1. And that's multiplied by dt. So now I'm ready to take the antiderivative. So that's going to be equal to t to the third. Notice my 3's are going to cancel. And then I'll write the minus sign. So what gives me an answer of secant tangent? And I hope you remember that secant, derivative of secant, when I take the derivative of secant is secant tangent. So I'll write minus secant. The antiderivative of 1 is 1t, and then finally plus c. Finally, number 4. If the second derivative of f is given by f double prime of f is equal to 2x minus cosine x, which of the following could be f of x? That's our parent function. So our first thing is we need to find our first derivative. So our first derivative is going to be equal to the antiderivative of 2x minus cosine x. And that's going to be equal to x squared minus, and if I was looking for a derivative of cosine, what gives me a derivative of cosine? And that is actually sine. And just so you know, this minus sign here is from the original problem. It has nothing to do with that this is a co. It has everything to do with that was a part of the problem. If it was a plus, if it said plus, then this would be plus. So be careful with your negatives. Again, this negative is from the original problem, so I just want to make sure you guys don't get too confused with that. If I do my negative rules, I'll make sure I write the original problem, and if it's a co, I'll go ahead and add in my negative as well. And then finally, plus your c. Well, that just only gives me f prime of x. Okay, I want the parent function, f of x. Well, f of x is going to be equal to the antiderivative of my f prime, which is x squared minus sine x plus my c. And I really don't care. I mean, they give me some different choices for my c, but I don't really care what number it is. It could be positive, it could be negative, it doesn't really matter. And so the antiderivative of x squared is x to the third over 3. And then this minus sign, because there's a minus sign here, that minus sign is that minus sign. I just dropped it down. And then again, what gives me a derivative of sine? Well, that'll be cosine. But again, I told you all co's are negative. Notice I got an answer of co, so I'm going to add in that little negative sign there. There's my negative sign. Plus, well, what's the antiderivative of any number? Well, this is going to be c, don't really care what the number is, times x. And so this, again, c is going to be your slope. And so there's kind of like slope. It could be 1, it could be negative 1, it could be 2, it could be 3, negative 3, doesn't really matter. And then plus, and I'm just going to use a different letter. It doesn't really matter, but instead of having another plus c, I'm going to say plus d. So I don't get you guys too confused between this c and this number. So they're two different numbers. So let's look. If I simplify this guy, I want you to notice that this right here creates a positive, a double negative there. So I have x to the third over 3, and this becomes a positive cosine, plus some sort of number times x, plus a different number. Or it could be the same one, but we just don't know. And so what we're looking at is which one gives a very similar form to this. Well, you can automatically get rid of d and e because they are not even x to the third. You can get rid of c because it's not being divided by 3. So that leaves us with a and b. If you notice the difference between a and b, it has everything to do with the sign of cosine. Well, we notice that after we've done with our double derivative, our double negative, once we've fixed that, we realize it became a plus sign, so we can automatically get rid of b. And so our final answer is A.